I want to do something completely different and fun, so I decided to try and do the most damage in one move in Pokemon TCG Pocket. However, this turned out to be way more difficult than expected as the RNG gods were not in my favor. I hope you guys enjoy, because this video cost me a lot of suffering due to the amount of coin flips I had to do, and I very nearly lost my sanity. So this whole idea started with finding the perfect strategy to get the highest damage on your profile. I looked at all the different cards and tried to find the best way to do max damage. Charizard, for example, can do 200 damage with the move Crimson Storm. But then I looked at other cards and, for example, Zapdos, my favorite legendary bird, is also only able to do 200 damage maximum with Thundering Hurricane. And then Dragonite, who can use Draco Meteor to hit different targets, but is also limited to only 200 damage. And then lastly Mewtwo, who you would expect to be the strongest, but his move does the least of them with only 150. I then looked at some other cards that could potentially boost the damage output, such as Giovanni or other trainers, or even cards like Weezing who can poison. But sadly, none of them had the damage output I was looking for to make this video entertaining. But then I came across a very special card, and you might already know about it, but it's none other than Lickitung. Lickitung has a very unique move called Continuous Lick. It does 60 damage for each coin that lands on heads, until you land a coin on tails. This means that in theory, Lickitung has the potential of unlimited damage as long as you're lucky enough. So who would have thought that this funny looking guy can strike tremendous fear into your opponents with his very long and slimy tongue. But what would be a reasonable damage output to expect? Well, this strategy is completely based on RNG. So the odds of doing high amounts of damage becomes very small very fast, with 10 heads equaling a chance of 1 in 1,000. Now you can see where I lost my sanity. So what will be an ideal Lickitung deck? Well, of course, you need to start with the main guy himself, Lickitung, and add 2 of its cards. You can then add 2 Giovannis to give you that little extra damage for a higher record, but I only have 1 in my account sadly. Then you can add 2 Professor Oaks to make sure you always have Lickitung in your hand. And the same goes for the Pokeball, because Lickitung of course is the core of your deck. Then you need 2 potions to make sure Lickitung stays alive for as long as possible. And then I was thinking of adding 2 Misty cards, but I realized you can only use the water Pokemon. So then I had to add a Snorlax and 2 Chanseys, which will then act as a damage sponge while you set up Lickitung. I added a Sabrina, which could give me an extra attack when used at the right time, and then 2 X-Speeds to switch out Chansey or Snorlax when needed, 2 red cards to slow down my opponent's game and give me more time to set up, and then 2 Pokédexes to time my Oaks and Pokeballs, and a Hand Scope to time my red card. Again, the goal of this deck is not to win, but only to get as many attacks off as possible. Because most of the time you will not do any damage with Lickitung, so the chances of winning in general are quite low. Of course, any alteration of this deck will do, as long as you have Lickitung in there. Then, in order to make your deck max damage record count on your profile, you need to find with random actual opponents, and not against the CPU or friends. So I ready my max damage deck, and then I start this long and mind-breaking journey. So my first battle started off against DK Prime. I won the toss and had to go first sadly, and he was running the classic Mewtwo EX deck with a Gardevoir. However, I managed to get my Lickitung to full energy whilst he had no Gardevoir yet, allowing me to attack at least a few times. It was time to do my first attack with Lickitung. I flipped the coin and of course it had to land on tails on my very first attempt. He sadly got Gardevoir on the next turn and knocked out 2 more of my Pokemon with Side Ride, making me lose my first game. But this was fine, it was only the first game after all, right? Well, the second game went no different. I got my attack off again, flipped my coin, and of course it landed on tails. So my first 2 games didn't go great, but it did not stop me of course. However, the RNG gods wanted to test me even more, and in all of my next games where I got an attack off, I landed my coin on tails. I started to think that my game was bugged and slowly lost hope of reaching an insane amount of damage. And you would think it could not get worse, right? Well, in this game I managed to get off 4 attacks in total. But would you believe it, they all landed on tails. Perhaps I should change my video to least damage records instead, because that will potentially be better and easier for me to do. But then finally, after changing to the Eevee coin, my 13th flip in a game against not John Tucker, I managed to get my first heads. And in a game shortly after, I first placed a water energy on my Lickitung, giving it free energy ready to attack. I had to heal up my Lickitung with potions, and this is also where you see how important potions are. But these potions gave Lickitung some extra boost. It's like giving berries to Pokemon or giving spinach to Popeye, or it's just a stupid superstition, because I finally got 2 heads in a row. I then knocked out the opponent's Lilligant and got my first point with Lickitung. But then we went way back to the start again, as all my flips afterwards were dramatic, and I started to think about changes I could make. So I went back to my deck and looked at what I could change. And that's when I figured out the best strategy ever. I changed my deck name from Max Damage to Subscribe. This foolproof plan got me a new record on my 31st flip against Wild Wurmple. My turn started, and after putting an energy on my backup Lickitung, I used Continuous Lick and flipped the Eevee coin. And lo and behold, I landed 3 heads in a row. This was a new record and also knocked out the opponent's Melmetal. It also gave me a huge boost in motivation and was finally looking forward again to my next games. And in a game shortly after, I managed to knock out 2 of my opponent's Pokemon already, and I was ready to take out the Lilligant to win the game. So I flipped my coin again and landed on 2 heads, which was just enough to take out the Lilligant. So I actually got a victory with this Lickitung deck, which is completely based on RNG, but it was so satisfying to reach this point after all the failed flips. Seeing Lickitung highlighted in the victory screen was the boost I needed to continue again. But that boost disappeared very fast after, and I was ready to give up again. So I went back to the drawing board and looked for other changes I could make. So I decided to change up the energies in my deck. I tried many different combinations because I'm a very superstitious person and hoped that a certain combination would lead me to 10 heads in a row. But it did not seem to help. I got close to breaking my current record a few times, but I was never able to reach that 4 heads in a row. So I continued the cycle, kept changing my energies, kept changing my deck names, but nothing seemed to help, obviously of course, until this fated moment on my 63rd flip, and I finally broke my record and managed to do 240 damage. The flipping always is so satisfying. And on my 94th flip, we're skipping a lot of flips now, I broke it again by flipping 5 heads in a row, reaching a huge 300 damage in one move. It also won me the game, but I was not satisfied yet. I wanted to do over 500 damage. But almost 100 flips later, and I never seemed to break the record of 5 flips. I got so close a few times, but that was about it. And at this point I was incredibly drained and suffering. And then almost 200 flips and nothing to show for it. I really needed mental help. We're now at flip 214, having tried out different energies and different deck names, but we reached 6 coin flips in a row. And we even used Giovanni, giving me that extra 10 damage. I was happy and thought this would be the end. But then this happened. I found a new opponent and their name was Marco Maas. The game started off slow, but I had my Lickitung in my starting hand. I managed to get 3 energies on that Lickitung and did my first attack. Sadly, I only reached 1 heads, but it was enough to knock out my opponent's Snom. But he still had a backup Snom, which had evolved to Frostmoth. Frostmoth is incredibly annoying to play against, because it forces me to flip even more coins, which I really don't want to do anymore at this point in time. But my next attack, I reached my new record of 7 coin flips in a row. This does a staggering 420 damage, which that Frostmoth really deserved. And then things got crazier. In the same game, a few flips later, I used Continuous Lick again, and would you believe it, I flipped another 7 coins in a row. Sadly, I did not reach the 8th, but doing 420 damage twice in the same game, while also winning it, was an achievement in itself. So, I maybe did not do the most damage in one move, but after 264 coin flips, 146 games, and 14 victories, I was ready to call it a day. And I reached a different record instead, where I did 900 damage with one Pokemon in one game against a real opponent. I really hope you enjoyed my suffering throughout the video, but I want to thank you guys for watching, and I hope to see you next time.